Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Senior Style Guide Real Talk podcast. If you're joining us on YouTube, welcome to that. Today I'm stoked to have Jed Taufer on. Hopefully I'm saying it right. I believe it is Taufer, who is from White House Custom Color. They are one of the go-to print labs, not only for me, but for tons of other professional photographers from across the nation who just do an exceptional job, have tremendous customer service skills. So we're just going to sit down with Jed and just kind of hear his take on life, the photography industry as a whole, and really dive into some topics that are relevant to you guys as well. So I want to always say, start it out by saying welcome and thank you guys. Thank you for coming on to Real Talk this morning, Jed.
Thank you for having me.
So give people a rundown. What is White House Custom Color? Who are you? What are you doing here?
White House Custom Color is a professional lab that we offer all kinds of products, from basic prints to albums, books, and wonderful wall display products, wood, metal. We can print on an awful lot of things, and we strive for the highest quality. We pride ourselves on our customer service and our very, very fast shipping times and our reliability. Essentially, we are one of the biggest professional labs in the nation, and we've been around for about 35 years now.
Awesome. Is there anything that you guys have tried printing on that you were like, this is not happening? Like, what's the weirdest thing that you guys have tried to print on?
Oh, we've tried all kinds of weird substrates and materials, and you generally know pretty fast. You know, we have a pretty solid R&D team that isn't afraid to try stuff out and see what works and what doesn't work. And most of the time, if it doesn't work, you know right away.
No, like tanned cowhides for that rustic appeal or anything like that.
Yeah, you're like, well, move on from that, and because there's so many different options these days.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, I know you guys. You mentioned the wall art and the metals and the canvases, and sister company Pro DPI too to you guys. Yeah. Who I use for, canvases and stuff. And you guys just have the best, most tightly wrapped canvases that I've ever looked at and felt in my life.
Quality is a huge deal. There's a lot of our clients have a very discriminating clientele themselves. And so the quality of the product has to be, at the utmost level of standard, right? So it has to be great. That's really what it comes down to.
Totally. So let's give a little bit of backstory for those who are wondering who you are. Cause with White House, we don't really, I have the opportunity through, going to trade shows and that sort of thing to really put a face to your guys' lab. But for those who maybe have never been to WPPI or a conference that you guys are at, like the Push conference, who are you? Kind of how did you get into White House and what's your role there?
My wife discovered White House, I think, in 2002 or 3, somewhere way back then. And that was when, we've had a photography studio for it's been 20 years. And we've worked together in some capacity from the very beginning. And we went through, the digital transition from film to digital in, I think, 2001. And it was messy. And we just weren't getting results from our former lab or any of the former labs we were using, because we were trying all kinds of stuff to try to get, consistent color. And she ordered a poster from this little lab in St. Paul, Minnesota at the time. And I saw the color, and it was a certain brown tone that we were doing that was like a big deal at the time. And it was just right on. And I said, where is that from? And she said, this little lab in Minnesota called White House. And I said, White House? I said, do they do other stuff? She's like, well, I think so. And so we sent them a bunch of test prints, and everything just came back right on the money. And at the time, that was virtually miraculous for us, because we were fighting with each other. She's the photographer, and I was the Photoshop guy doing everything on the back end and ordering all the prints, and they would come back magenta, or they'd come back, blown out, or some sort of problem, except when we found White House. So a lot of times we joke around that White House saved our marriage, because in a sense they did.
Literally, though.
it was 2 years of, we were at each other's throats on and off for 2 years. It was rough.
Yeah. And then how did you get into working for White House? You find this lab. They're in, is it St. Cloud or St. Paul?
Well, they were in St. Paul. They have since moved to Eagan, Minnesota, which is right up there, right just outside of the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And we after that process, we just essentially got to know them really well. They were much smaller in 2003 than they are today. And it's like it's like anything when you regarding relationships, right? With a company that you really like. Even like if you think about some of the local places, like I go to breakfast at this local diner up here, and one of the reasons I go back there is because I know everybody that's there. And the reason I know everybody that's there is because I frequented their establishment and got to know everybody. And so relationally, that's where I'm going to go if I want breakfast, right? So that's kind of what happened with White House. And it was much more feasible back then because of how small they were. And we were all kind of, in the hustle, in the mix of this hustle.
Totally.
At the beginning of sort of the digital transition, so to speak. So we were growing, they were growing. We were dealing with a lot of the same issues and struggles because people don't realize, but in 2002 and 3, you couldn't just hop online and get all the information that would steer you in the right direction.
No.
The internet was a thing, but it wasn't the thing that it is today. So really very few people had answers that were reliable and that you could trust. And when we found them and realized that that they had it figured out, it was such a big deal that relationally, it just worked out for both of them. It was like a really good fit,
Totally.
And so, I don't know, 5 or 6 years after that, we talked about, because we were speaking and they were sponsoring us, and that intensified the relationship, solidified the relationship, so to speak. And when at some point they asked me to come and work for them if I'd be interested, and by that time my wife and I had been working together for 10 years, and that takes its toll. And I think we were both like, yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. So that was 10 years ago.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about that. You said that working with your wife for 10 years and there were ups and there were downs. Yes. Talk a little bit about, working with your spouse. There are a lot of photographers out here who maybe their spouses are doing exactly what you're doing, where it's running the back end and they're shooting, or both.
Yeah. God bless you, all of you, for giving it a shot and for sticking with it. It's tough. We always, when we would speak, this would be like the question that we got most of the time. And we would always say that the challenges are that much harder, and they are, I think, but the victories are that much sweeter, right? Like, so when you accomplish something together, it's that much better because you get to share it with your favorite person in the world. And at the same time, when there's a failure or an issue or an obstacle, it's that much harder. We would say that, typically if you have like a normal job, I would guess I would call it, and you're not working with your spouse and you come home and you're stressed or there's a problem, you have your spouse to talk to about it and they can like help you go through it. When your spouse is the cause or a big part of said stress, or you're in the mix together, it's not the same. We would say that the shoulder to cry on is attached to the neck you want to wring, because you don't have that ability to really unload on a person when they're either the cause of the stress or a big part of it with you. So it's just different. But I wouldn't change it for the world. We had an amazing time. And, my office is here and this is our studio. So it's not like I'm completely absent. I still take out the trash or, fix printers when they
Sure.
need like that. And every once in a while I'll get pulled into a, what do you think about this meeting sort of thing. But for the most part, it's my wife and a few people that are helping her with the studio, and I'm kind of on the outside.
Yeah. What's the difference between those two, where you're kind of more removed now and then when you're really kind of in the midst of it all?
Feasibility. this works a lot better for us. I'm just very high level. I mean, technically I own half the studio. And so very high level stuff I get pulled into. So that's not very often. And it just makes more sense for us relationally.
Totally.
I mean, for a while there, I got pulled in, 18 years ago because it was necessary. Like if we wanted to do this, we didn't really have any other choice that made sense. And now, you build up your business over a long time and you create a brand and you get to a point where you have more options. And so for us, this is the best option. I totally get not everybody's in that situation, especially if you're just starting out. You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Right. Which is
let's take that for example. I mean, you guys were working together for 10 years before you kind of, moved on to the next chapter. And so other people who they might not have been shooting for 10 years yet, much less running a business with their significant other for 10 years.
Right. I understand the struggle. Let me put it that way. And it's nice to be in the position that we're in now, but there is something about going through that together that I would hope that people that are in it, that are in the mix, that are going through the highs and the lows, that you can sometimes stop and step back and realize how amazing it is that you get to do something like that together, because it really is.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned, the transition from, I don't even know when it was. It was in the early 2000s where film to digital.
Yeah.
And now let's talk a little bit about that transition to almost like overcompensating, kind of like that pendulum swing is almost all the way to digital, where a lot fewer photographers are offering products. And a new photographer pops up and they send out the gallery of images and kind of wash their hands and they're done with the senior. But I found products to be such a powerful part of photography business and experience. So what's your take on that whole transition and just kind of your 2 cents coming from someone who is, so invested in products and sees the value of them?
Well, there's a couple things. First of all, just from a practical business-minded standpoint, those models are totally fine if you don't care about money. Like if that's what, and that's not even 100% true, because there are some people that rock that model and can make a killing. More power to you. But for most of us, if you're not offering products, you're leaving money on the table. Yeah. The other piece is that applies to everybody, even if you are making a killing just shooting and burning or delivering digitally only, is that I believe that most of the time you're doing your client a disservice.
Yes.
Not always, because there are applications, there are situations and circumstances where that's all that's necessary, really all that's needed or wanted, right? No matter what. But most of the time, I think, in general, your client wants a physical product, whether they know it or not.
Yep.
And that sounds arrogant. I feel like Steve Jobs when I say that. Like you almost have to. We're in a situation sometimes where you have to tell your client or show your client what they want.
Exactly.
And that's true even if they do want a product. A lot of times you still have to show them what it is that you think is best for them.
Well, what does Steve Jobs say? He says something along the lines of your customer doesn't know what they want until you tell them what they want, or something like that.
Something along those. Yeah. He said a lot of things, but regarding all of that, he was right basically in a lot of ways, because your client doesn't know most of the time what's really available to them and what you're capable of unless you show them. There's the show it to sell it type mantra, right?
Yeah.
There's the, when someone comes in, a lot of times, even if they are interested in products or open to the idea, one of the first things they say is, what do you recommend? Or what do you think? So being ready in those scenarios is a big deal. Like show them what their album options are, right? Show them what their wall art options are. have samples. Those are all huge deals that don't take a lot of effort on the front end from you as a business person or an artist or both, to make it happen. Right? It's not, a lot of people get a little freaked out by products. I don't know how to sell. I don't know. A lot of times it speaks for itself when they see a beautiful album or a beautiful wall portrait on your wall.
Yeah. Well, and I was just, this is not just happened, but at the time of this recording, this past weekend, I was at a grad party for one of my recent graduating high school seniors, and she had, this isn't hers, but she had out one of the 11 by 14 albums.
Yeah.
And, you open it up and it's edge to edge.
Yep.
The pages are thick.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you the first thing, I kid you not, the very first thing that her mom says to me as I walk in the party is, you would not believe how many compliments we were getting on such and so-and-so's photos from the album. Because they had it laid out, and it was, people are so used to those companies that you can just go to online and from a consumer standpoint, and the pages are, thin and they don't stand up. And so you talk about having samples and showing kind of your clients as, these are the album options that you have. These aren't just what you can get from Sam down the street at the Kinko's Print Lab or whatever it is. These are high quality.
By looking at it, you can tell by looking at it, and the second you hold it or turn a page, it's a completely different experience.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing where it's crazy story. So Apple, if you've ever walked into an Apple store, they actually have a tool that measures, it's kind of like a protractor, measures the angle that their screens are. So every day when the store opens, what they do is they actually angle the screens in a certain way to encourage people to touch and feel that product, to form that emotional connection. And so it's like the same thing with those sample products, where all of a sudden you look at the album and say, oh, that's nice. And then you feel and you're like, oh, this is next level right here.
Yes. Yeah.
So, all right. So now we've kind of talked about, the importance, and from just a practical business sense, why it's smart to offer products. Yeah. What are a couple tips that you have for photographers who might be struggling, where they say, Jed, this isn't in my business model. I don't know if I can do it. What do you say to those photographers who are on the fence?
Start small. Pick a thing, right? Pick albums, or pick. I prefer wall art for a few reasons. So I would probably, if given the choice, pick wall art. But sometimes in senior photography, like, the album is the thing, right?
Yeah.
Depending on your market and your photography and the type of experience you're offering. So I don't want to rule that out.
Well, let's also talk even geographic regions. We're on the West Coast.
Of course.
It's a lot harder to sell wall art because the homes are a lot smaller versus, in the Midwest where.
Well, they say that on the East Coast a lot of times. Yeah. Places too. I remember a friend of mine from New Hampshire said that we have to sell a lot of panoramas because everyone lives in an older house and they have 8-foot ceilings. They don't have these great, in the Midwest, everybody's got a great room with 20-foot ceilings and it's no big deal. So we're, it's not too far fetched for us to sell, huge wall prints all the time because that's what's appropriate.
Totally.
So that's a really good point. But either way, pick something that's going to make sense, and start with that. You don't have to bite off more than you can chew. Give it a shot. So, if you're not a client, you can sign up at White House, get the process started, send in 5 test prints to see where you're at color wise, and then once you get that locked down, which is usually very, very simple, easy, fast. You don't really have to do much of anything most of the time. Is order a sample album. You get a big discount. You can see what it looks like. You have it in your hand. And then on a client that you think would make sense, give it a shot and design something on spec for them. So when they come into their appointment or when you meet with them, or even if you're showing them an online gallery, it's done. It doesn't need to take a lot of time. Just throw something together. You don't need a huge amount of, elements in your design, and like an image on a page is plenty.
Yeah.
and give it a shot and show them. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised how easy it really is.
Yeah. Well, it takes, I think from start to finish, designing an album and sending it off to you guys is maybe 10 to 15 minutes tops.
If it takes more than 20 minutes, there are things most likely that you can do to cut it down to under that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think even, from a time standpoint where people are like, well, it's just so much easier to throw them up in a gallery. Well, a lot of times it's not going to take you that much time, and the profit and the revenue that you're going to drive from those processes are going to far outweigh the time that you're using to spend to shoot another client to really make about the same amount.
Throw them up in a gallery and include an album. Yeah. just include it as an option, right? And there are different ways to promote that, right? Even if you happen to have one at your session, right? So that they can actually see it and feel it if they're not going to come in again. But yeah, like it's not that hard, and you'll find yourself maybe having the freedom to actually work less and make the same, if not more. And maybe that's what you were alluding to there.
Yeah. One, like you said, leaving that album where it's kind of one of their first touch points with you as a professional. I have one, I don't have a salon because I'm on the road so much that, it would sit for 9 months out of the year, but, my hair and makeup salon that I use, one of my albums is right there.
Yep.
And as parents are sifting through the magazines, and all of a sudden there's this hefty 11 by,
Yep.
And it's right there for them.
Well, and so that's another point, is working with vendors and having your products out there, not just, like a 5x7 or a little brochure or even a little card, or even like business cards up at, at a desk if you're working with the salon. But having that album there is a great way to advertise who you are and your business. And in the person's home, it does the same thing. We know that the best way to get new clients is referral. Mm-hmm. And what a better way than for someone to see their friend's album or their friend's photos on the wall or whatever. It's one thing to see everything on Facebook and social media in general, or Instagram is a big deal. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying one over the other. I'm saying don't leave one of those out.
Yeah.
They work so well together in tandem, right?
Well, and I think that, you mentioned the importance of social media and showing your clients, even if it's not physical. You guys do a really cool, almost like an informational guide that you just started putting out with all the products, and it's unbranded so that the photographer can use it in their own business without really having to tweak much.
Those are inspiration guides. You can get them for $1 a piece. I think you get them 5 at a time, and you essentially get the client version, which is like a square. It's the aspect ratio is a square, and then your version is vertically oriented, because there's more information in there. Like your version has the branding, your version has the pricing. Theirs doesn't have any pricing. It's got your pricing. Their version doesn't have any pricing, but it has all the same images and pictures and information regarding the products. And it's a fantastic sales tool.
Yeah.
It's a great way for them to see what their options are and how they're used, because all the shoots are styled shoots. So you see like the way that wall portraits and albums are actually integrated in somebody's home.
Yeah. So let's get off the topic of photography. You just got back from Italy at the time of filming.
Yeah.
Let's talk about travel and taking time for yourself, kind of stepping away from business, and how important that is to growing as an individual and keeping your sanity.
Again, this comes back to, that is very important. Not always possible, not always feasible. We went through a very long stretch of time where that wasn't an option, because we were pouring ourselves into getting this thing off the ground. And so if that's where you're at, keep at it, so that you can get to a point where travel and more time for yourself is feasible. I would say to anybody, carve out some time whenever you can. But yes, taking time for ourselves and our family, we have 2 kids, is a huge deal. If you're not doing that, or you're not able to do that, then what are we doing? Like, what's going on? It's such a big deal relationally with your spouse, if you have kids, with your kids, to do that and to step away. Because otherwise, and this happened to us, your business becomes your identity. And oh my goodness, I can't speak enough against that. I'm all about being all about your business and your brand and getting your hustle on and making it happen. But your business is not who you are. You are not your business. You are you. Your business is a separate entity. And I think that, from an identity standpoint, ne'er the two shall meet. Keep them separate. Strive for that healthy balance, that healthy order in your life of priorities. And sometimes, that's a little fluid. Things shift, right? There are times when you're like, I got to work tonight, and I might have to work till 3 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
But if you find yourself working till 3 a.m. all the time, and you don't recognize your kids, and they don't recognize you, or you don't recognize your spouse or your significant other, or your buddies, or whatever, you might want to rethink what's going on. Because 5 years goes by pretty fast. 10 years goes by pretty fast. And it is easy to slip into that and then look back and have a mountain of regret. Totally. So don't do it. Don't do it.
Well, I think you kind of alluded to those stages where, there are stages where you have to grind. And
Yep.
So, those 5-day kind of trips to the beach or the mountains or whatever aren't really possible.
No, right.
But, 6 hours out with your buddies every 2 weeks or something like that.
A 20-minute walk is good for some people sometimes. Just get away from your machine, right? Or your camera, like get away. Just take a walk outside, take a nap. Do whatever is good for you to step away from what it is. And I think you'll find especially if you incorporate that ritualistically even into your daily routine or your weekly routine, that it can make a really big difference and keep you grounded, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you're as routine based for me, where I like having my routines, and it almost is, it's just a way to, I think, put you in the right mindset.
Right.
And so if you start to include those times away as part of your routine, I think that actually opens you up creatively, where all of a sudden it's not, you're turning from kind of so much introspection of what can I do at this time while I'm creating, versus being open to thoughts coming in while you're on that walk, like you mentioned. Or
it's an intentional change of perspective, right? When you're standing at the base of a mountain, you can't see the mountain. You just see whatever's right in front of you. And maybe that's just a bunch of rock or a forest or whatever. It's like you can't see the forest for the trees, right? You step back from something and your whole perspective changes. A lot of times you can see things a lot more clearly. You see things that you didn't even know were there about your business or about your relationships or whatever. And you're in a much better position, I think, to consider what your options are, which way you should go, right? And if you just stay in the grind all the time, you'll miss that stuff in your business, in your relationships, in everything.
So how do people overcome that? You mentioned it's a shift in perspective.
Well, the shift of perspective is the result of an act of will, intentional, being intentional with an act of will and saying, I am going to come out of this like this, whether it's a walk or whether it's a trip or whether it's conversation with a friend or with a business partner or whoever. Like, this is what this is going to look like. I need to intentionally seek this perspective, which is an outside perspective, away from, all the minutia of my business. And I'm going to incorporate that on a regular reoccurring basis, whether it's once a day on a walk or whether it's once a week with a conversation, or whether it's, once a quarter with a weekend trip or twice a year with a week-long trip, whatever you can do or whatever makes sense. It's the intentionality that it requires sometimes at the beginning, especially, an act of will, because it's one of those things that if you get really wrapped up in your business, if you don't purposefully try to make that happen, it's likely not going to. And then again, a year goes by, 5 years goes by, 10 years goes by, and you're like, well, at least I worked really hard.
Yeah.
Like, woo, that was great. Lots of hard work.
Lots of hard work. And then you might have a business, but then all of a sudden you look around and that's it.
You might have a fantastic business, but in some cases that might be all you have. And you might have lost things or missed out on things that, with that intentionality in place, you could have had all of that. And who knows what comes with the rest of that stuff, with relationships and with things outside of your business. Amazing things that a lot of times contribute to the success of your business.
Absolutely. When I think it's important to keep in mind too, where everybody says, I want to build a big business, or I want to grow a successful business, or I want to be successful.
Right.
And people purely look at it from a monetary aspect, where they want to hit a financial goal. They want to hit a certain number of clients per year. Mm-hmm. And they forget that in a lot of ways, success doesn't look like that. What we see when we look at somebody and they're like, oh, that person's so successful. And what I've been actually thinking about this a lot recently. What I think it boils down to is freedom. I think it's having the freedom to do what you want with who you want. I think that's ultimately, at least for me, what success boils down to is having that freedom. Yeah,
the freedom and the flexibility are a huge draw for entrepreneurs in general. The other side of that coin generally is that you're also the one responsible, ultimately. So if something happens, it's on you.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
But the goal is to, of course, get to a point where, sure, you're responsible for something, but you either have, solutions for those ready, or you have things in place that prevent most of those issues, so that you can have that freedom. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, financial freedom comes along with freedom in general. And I understand all that. And I don't think, and you're not saying this, but I don't think that having financial goals are a bad thing. You're not saying this at all.
No, I don't think so.
It's a very good thing. No. But I think you put yourself in a dangerous situation where you get laser focused on the money.
Yeah.
And nothing else.
Exactly. I think it's when that becomes your only measure when I think that's when it gets dangerous, right?
When that gets fixed at the top of that, what I was talking about, fluid priority list of priorities, when that gets fixed up there at the top, you could be in trouble.
So, what are you kind of obsessed with right now, or inspired by, or into right now besides photography, whether that be a hobby or spending time with your kids, literally whatever?
Well, I have a podcast with White House. You asked me earlier, and I didn't tell you that, but that's actually what I do. A big part of what I do for them is my podcast. It's called This Conversation. It's at conversation.whcc.fm. On the web.
They can find you on iTunes and Spotify, right?
iTunes, and not Spotify.
So just iTunes?
Certainly iTunes, and I think Google Play. But my favorite thing to do is talk to people. I don't like speaking like to big groups. I actually hate that. I will do it mostly begrudgingly, and I will put my all into it, but I'm scared of it. That's, it's a fear thing. I'm terrified of it. A lot of people say most people are more scared of public speaking than they are of death. That's me.
Yeah.
Death does not scare me at all, but I am absolutely terrified of speaking in front of large groups of people. But small groups of people, or one-on-one or one-on-two or three, is my jam.
Yeah.
What I love to do. And I like to talk about the what's and the whys of stuff, man. And I don't care what someone else believes or thinks. I just want to know what it is and why they think that way. I'm super fascinated and curious about that stuff regarding other people and their thoughts and how they live their lives based on that.
Do you have like a psychology background or anything like that?
Well, I have a, that's my, it sounds weird.
I was about to say, we have therapist Jed over here up in Real Talk in this conversation today.
Well, it sounds weird, but that is my hobby. It
Oh,
was
I love it.
I had 7 majors in college. I didn't do college.
Holy cow. Yeah.
I didn't make it through, actually. But psychology was one of my majors during those tumultuous years of my existence. And it was because that's what I really, really love, is what other people think and why they think that. Like I can't think of anything that is more intriguing to me than that. So, yeah. But yeah, I'm really into movies and music, and I play video games, and I like home theater gear, and I like gear in general.
You gear junkie?
Yeah, a little bit. I like spending time outside with my wife and kids. We hike a lot, and we ride our bikes a lot and go to the park a lot, and grill out. Like, I love grilling out, mostly because I love eating delicious food.
Yep.
And so travel is fun too. I generally don't like the act of traveling. I like point A and point B. I just don't like a line in between.
Let's talk about that, because I'm the same way. And my girlfriend, she is a road tripper. She loves the journey, and I got into this conversation with her, and I was like, I can't do road trips. They drive me crazy, because I love that point A and that point B where, I have that destination planned. And she goes, I love stopping at those small towns and finding those people that you don't find anywhere else, and those sites. And I think there's merit to that. But
there's a lot of merit to it.
Yeah. But let's talk about, I think it's a different mentality, to be honest.
Well, it's patient. For me, it's patience.
Yeah.
I get, and I don't do a lot. We do some road trips, so I'm in the car sometimes, but most of the time it's flights. And so for me, it's airports. And oh my goodness, I'm not a fan of airports. Just not. Don't like being there. Don't like waiting. Don't like.
You're in Minneapolis right now, aren't you?
Well, Illinois. No. We moved back.
Oh,
from
okay. So you're in Morton.
So that's I'm in Morton. So the other thing is, that's Minneapolis is a fantastic airport.
I was about to say, there's a place with bomb breakfast stromboli that I trekked across the airport for the other day on a connection.
MSP is a fantastic airport, so don't get me wrong about that. Some airports are much better than others, but now in Illinois, we connect a lot of times, depending on where we're going, through O'Hare.
Yeah.
And I think O'Hare is a nightmare.
Yeah. For connections, it is, yes.
Oh my gosh. And I don't know how many times we've been delayed or canceled but we go to O'Hare, then we fly to Rome. So it's, a little short little flight and then one big flight, which is great. But the airport experience in general, I'm not pleasant to be around when I'm at an airport mostly. My wife could tell you all kinds of stories about me. My kids travel a lot better than I do.
Yeah.
A lot better than I do. Yeah. So, yeah, there's that.
See, that's funny. I don't mind airports. I just find, one of the few power outlets there, get some work done.
Yeah.
Wait for my boarding group, and then I'm off.
I get it. And Vicki does that a lot too. She's like, this is my time, or I can just, I'm like, really? You can't. I prefer to do that in my office.
Yeah.
When I'm at an airport, I just don't want to be at the airport anymore.
Yeah. You're ready to get on the plane and get on to the next thing.
Ready to get there. Ready to arrive.
So what do you think kind of comes next for you in life, whether that be personally or business-wise?
We have, business-wise, there are a lot of exciting things going on with what my wife's doing at the studio that she's experimenting with, that she's never done and that nobody in our area does. So I'm super excited to see the results of those experimental shoots and whatnot come out. They'll be coming out. And then at White House, there is a list longer than my arm of things that we're doing right now, especially on the software front, sales software in particular. We're really focused on, and incorporating that into ordering, making the ordering experience a lot better, and really just giving our clients at White House the resources that they need to do the things that we talk about all the time. Like, well, let's make it easier for you to order. Let's help you get your clients the products that they should be buying, right?
Yep.
And we're focusing on that so much, and there's so many things that are coming out here in the next few months that I'm really excited about. Just great stuff. And then
That's awesome.
personally, I don't know, still just trying to maintain that order, that balance of keeping my wife and kids first. I'm a man of faith, so that plays a big part into who I am and what I do, and that perspective thing again. That's what helps me stand back, I think, the most, and see things from I would call it an eternal perspective as opposed to temporal perspective, so to speak. So yeah, that stuff.
Cool. Where can people find you and White House on social and online?
White House is WHCC.com, and on Instagram, it's WHCC Pro. I am Jedness on Instagram personally, or This Convo on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook as well. And my wife's photography website is vgallery.net. That's where we're at.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on here. I always like to wrap with you getting to ask a question to the viewers and the listeners for them to DM us on Instagram, so you can tag at Jedness and at WHCC Pro and at Senior Style Guide on Instagram stories as you answer the question. Just screenshot the podcast and answer this question, but you get to ask them one question. It can be personal, so it could be a selfish question or just something that you're curious about that they'll have a chance to answer below.
So I do a lot of consultations, or I have done a lot of consultations for many, many years. And almost every time, if the conversation that we're having goes past the surface, which usually it does, not just personally, but even in business, I ask the same question. I end up getting to the same question. And it is, what do you want? The question itself is very, vague, ambiguous, broad, so to speak. But the answer should be specific as possible. So think about that if you decide to answer the question.
I love it. Awesome. Well, you left us with a lot of food for thought. So Thank you so much. I love hearing your insights. You're in the photography business, but you're not in the act of shooting, which I think is a super important perspective to have on. So I thank you for sharing that today with us.
Thanks. So
awesome. Well, until next time, Jed, it was awesome having you on. We'll make sure that our viewers and listeners are able to connect with you. Shout them out, say hello. And until next time, we'll see you guys on the next episode of Senior Style Guys Real Talk.